All right, let's see who remembers anything from American history last Friday. Yes?
I remember it all. I don't remember it all.
Okay, what was the score?
61.
60. Ouch. Ouch. Baseball games are fun to go to occasionally. The first one I ever went to, there were 2 Grand Slams. That was nothing like that. So. And then also I saw Sammy Sosa hit the home run in the bottom of the 8th to put the Cubs up and win the game. 2-run home run. Other times it's 6-1 and you sit in the bleachers and freeze. All right, sorry, baseball game on Friday. What was the name of Truman's social program that was going to save us from all the evils in the world? The Fair Deal. We mentioned some of the types. Really, it's more of the same liberal social programs that they're wanting more of today to fix these things. At some point, you would think you would have had enough of these, just like the minimum wage is never high enough. And we'll go to $15 an hour, and in a few years, we'll have the same politicians who said we need the $15 an hour, and that doesn't fix everything, talking about how we need to, who can live on $15 an hour? They won't talk about the fact that the raise it to 15 made all the prices go up. They won't talk about that. But anyway, more of the same. All right, then we talked about under Truman, and it really bleeds beyond Truman in both directions. And this communist subversion of our government, this massive communist infiltration, excuse me, of our government. Does anybody know any names associated with that?
The Smith Act.
The Smith Act, of course. All right, any spies? The Smith Act was the one that made it illegal to advocate the violent overthrow of our government, or be a member of a group that advocated that. To me, it's kind of interesting to have a law to specify that, but it's okay. Any particular spies?
Whitaker Chambers.
Whitaker Chambers? Yep. One night after screams.
The Rosenbergs?
Rosenbergs, the nuclear bomb secrets, talked about Alger Hiss. Sorry. But it was 2 answers for today. You don't want to get carried away. Slow this thing down a little bit. All right, who was the senator who started putting stuff out? McCarthy. And he was made fun of and maligned and censored by the Senate, and the media talked about this crazy man on a witch hunt. But really, what would be a more accurate statement? That he exaggerated the problem or he understated the problem? Something wasn't even here. You tell us who scored one of the runs or something? Or? Overstated or understated? What would be a more accurate assessment of McCarthy? Jasmine had her hand up and then she pulled it down. You got a 50-50 shot if you want. He understated it, yeah, really. The problem was worse than he was saying. So, no, he didn't help himself out a lot. He had a kind of a brash personality, and sometimes abrasive. So that didn't help him. But actually, the accusations and the things he was claiming, it was worse than he was stating.
Whatever happened to him?
He dies in 57. So, in 54, the Senate officially denounces him as this crazy man on this witch hunt. He doesn't run for re-election, but dies in 57. Did he die? Did he die of natural causes? Yeah, I said probably he was assassinated. Would it have been the communist agents that assassinated him because he was so close to the truth? Or the liberals in Congress that assassinated him? Or would it have been the media? Or was it a conspiracy of all of them together? Pretty much any event in history, you can find some crazy conspiracies about it. The internet's full of them. Just Google them. I've never looked into that, but there's got to be somebody that thinks he was poisoned or something. All right, that was under Truman. Then we talked about Eisenhower, and he was a change in mindset. At least he did believe in a free market, tried to pull back government control, some of the tentacles that were still there from the war, pull those things out. Talked about segregation in the schools, how that issue came up with him, and the Arkansas incident, then the Suez Canal, and the Congo, and China. Some things. Some of those just kind of referencing that he was the president when those things happened. Then we got the JFK. How should we summarize JFK? Thank you. Well, but you're careful somewhere, Jeff K. That's kind of a vague question. The last point I made is, it's not this word between my nose, but he was a filthy, womanizing pig.
I did.
In my notes I have that he was well known for not being faithful to his wife, but filthy, womanizing pig gives us the flavor a little bit better. All right, talked about his social program, A New Frontier. His famous phrase, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Talked about the economy. What surprising thing did he do during to address a recession?
So you called for tax cut?
Yeah, tax cut. It is funny. Every now and then, Republicans will pull up some of his speeches calling for this tax cut, and they always get so mad. It's, oh no, he's a Democrat. You can't use him. But he did actually cut taxes, and talked about school prayer being kicked out, and Bible readings being kicked out of public schools during his presidency. Then mentioned a couple of foreign affairs things: the Bay of Pigs, the Berlin Wall, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all under him. And then he got shot. And was it the puff of smoke behind the picket fence? If you've ever shot a gun much at all, that one is the most funny. Some of them were just hilarious. A puff of smoke, like they were using a rifle from pre-Spanish American War or something. If I'm going to, maybe there's this real sense of history when using a historic rifle to shoot the president with. So I don't think I mentioned before. I listened to an interview. There was a guy. He might be dead now. He was in prison in Juliet, and it was just an hour away. That claimed he was the guy behind the picket fence. He said it was me. It was a mob. So he worked for the mob, and they said, no, I had to shoot the president. But he's in prison, claiming it was him. Anyway, Oswald, a lone crazy man, shot the president, despite all the conspiracies. All right, Johnson, he was the next president. What was his social program? He kind of has two. He cheated.
Great Society.
The Great Society, move onward, not only towards a rich society, but upward to the Great Society. Hammers all kinds of bills through Congress, and is a complete failure, even by his estimation, a complete failure. They have to also layer into here, this is the middle of the 60s, and we have the civil rights movement blowing up, and riots in the streets, and the Vietnam War protests. There's massive chaos everywhere. So his program would have been a failure, but I think all of the flagrant evidence for that causes him to even recognize that. So the Great Society, we talk about the war on poverty, supposedly to end poverty. I want the federal government to declare war on me, if this is going to be. They've not gotten rid of it, they've expanded it. I think I mentioned Armstrong landing on the moon. That was just during his presidency. Okay, so that was Johnson. Questions about him? We've got a few more presidents to talk about, and then if we can get up to Reagan, we'll be really good. We'll do Reagan on Friday, and then that'll be a convenient point to stop for preaching conference. All right, next president is Richard Nixon. Richard Milhouse Nixon. He's president from 69 to 74. So that's not a 4-year span there. So did he take over when Johnson died? No, he didn't die. So he leaves office early. Right? Lots of times when we see somebody not serving a multiple of 4 years, they take over for the assassinated president. He resigns, so he doesn't serve his second term out completely. All right, I've got his administration split up into the first and second administrations. The second administration is dominated by Watergate. The whole scandal that ultimately leads in his resignation. But the first administration, a couple of things that happened there. All right, domestically, a couple of things were going on. This was the era where the Supreme Court began, or the Supreme Court, I guess we should say that, began demanding that schools be desegregated. They began to require that students be bused from black communities to the white school districts and from white communities to the black school districts. That was all a court order, essentially, requiring states to desegregate their schools. Hopefully there's something, forget the racial prejudice side of it, hopefully there's something there that just graces, wait a second, the court, they don't have the right to do this, it's not their right. And there are people that argue that point, but anyway, but that was during his presidency. There was some significant resistance to that, and not all just based on racial prejudice. All right, so the school busing, that was under him. Again, he wasn't on the Supreme Court, and he didn't pick the people on there, but he happened to be president when that goes through. All right, the next thing with him is the economy. A little bit about the economy. Basically, the economy was in a big mess. Johnson spent money like a drunken sailor, doesn't give the right phrase. Like a Democrat? I'm trying to think of some, like a woman with someone else's credit card at the perfume store or clothing store. Cabela's. Spent money like crazy. That fits a little bit. All right, so we have this huge, gigantic mess. We had his Great Society, these social programs that spent tons of money, and we also had to lay into that all the expense and the chaos from Vietnam. So we had a very, very ugly economy during this time. Massive debt by the government. I know that. What's the big deal about that? We could eclipse it. We have. And also high inflation. It was just so a bad economy. Bad economy. Right. Nixon here initially tinkers on the perimeters of things, cuts back on spending by the government, which that pretty much at any point is an appropriate response. Cutting back, meddling with interest rates, which is not really, shouldn't be within the government's grasp to do anyway, begins to meddle with those, does some periphery things like that. Eventually, he begins to push what he called his new economic policy. And it really was, it was more just direct government intervention and not even clouded so much this time. Nixon once stated, we're all Keynesians now. The Keynesian economics. But anyway, this new economic policy did things like this. It froze all wages and prices for 90 days. The boss couldn't give you a pay cut or a pay raise. The store couldn't, gas prices couldn't go up or down. Prices of bread. Froze all those. There should be something screaming in your mind. He doesn't have that authority. Congress doesn't have that authority. It's true. They do not. But it froze all those. And then the second thing is it established a board to then regulate those prices for a full year. And the excuse was we have this inflation that's getting out of hand, so we're just going to not let people raise prices so that inflation ends. Somebody's breathing too much, so the solution is we're going to tape their mouth shut, not let them breathe. It creates other very significant problems. So this doesn't fix the problem. Anyway, it sets up this board to regulate these prices for a year. Anyway, just direct government intervention. At least before it was kind of on the perimeters and government indirectly doing things. This is just directly saying you can't raise the price, you can't cut your employees' wages, just directly like that, and then a board to do it after. So anyway, new economic policy. If you're wondering, it doesn't work. It never has. Government involvement in the economy. It just creates more of a mess. It doesn't fix it. It really doesn't get fixed until some crazy Republican comes in that wants to win a Cold War. He managed to fix it. All right, last thing here with domestic affairs is welfare. He continued to expand these programs. The particular program that he creates and expands is Aid to Families with Dependent Children, AFDC. So if you have dependent children in your house, then the government's wanting to help you. Run screaming, okay, when that happens. Basically, more social programs. I should double check this number. I've got a location by my Kindle, so I don't know. The number seems astronomical. To give you an idea of how much money we begin to spend on these types of things, in '65, which is predates Nixon, we were spending $2,000 a year on programs like aid to families with dependent children, money given directly. I have 1977, it's $167,000 per person, but that should be a mistype. The point is, it's increasing drastically during this time. Location 17461. No idea. Probably under Nixon, but it might not necessarily be under Nixon. You still read paper, folks. What's wrong with you? Even if my own phone, I read on my Kindle. It's not that important. I'm not going to ask you for the particular number, but it is a massive expenditures. Today, we're somewhere pushing 80%, 75-80% of the money spent by the national government is on this type of stuff. It's crazy how much it is. And you still have liberals saying, oh, we're wasting so much money on the military. What about all the social programs? Anyway, massive expenditure. So, all right, domestic affairs.
I found it.
You found it? My number's right?
Social spending, yes,
Okay.
especially AFDC. Perhaps per person cost to live someone out of poverty went from $2,000 in 1965 to $167,000 by 1977.
Oh. So I didn't type it correctly. And we still have people in poverty. Just imagine if we got rid of the whole bureaucracy and just wrote the check to those people. 167,000. I think I can get out of poverty for that much money. So, all right, wow, I almost thought I typed the number wrong. All right, foreign affairs. A couple of things there. Still his first administration. All right, first issue is China. He attempts to take advantage of the disagreement between China and the Soviet Union. They're both communist countries, but China is beginning to chafe at the Soviet Union, claiming that they're the ones that control everything. But China said, no, we're our own country. We can make our own decisions. We don't want to be near them. So there begins to be some real strife there. And Nixon steps in to do some things to try to encourage that. I don't agree with everything he did here. We mentioned before at some point that he visits China in '71. There's some famous pictures of him on the Great Wall of China. Visits China. But some other things that he did is he recognized the communist government of China. Think of, historically here we have the communist Chinese Revolution, throwing out Chiang Kai-shek and the free government. They go to Taiwan, and here he recognizes as the official legitimate government of China, the communist one. He did not, at least from our stance, America's stance, then say that Taiwan and the free people that left there, that they were somehow illegitimate. He recognized them as their own country as well. But he did officially recognize China. And again, the excuse was to try to drive this wedge between the two main communist countries in the world. So he recognizes them. He also encouraged them being allowed to be part of the United Nations. So another crazy communist country, part of the United Nations. China. So again, people try to justify those things as him trying to take advantage of that, but to me it seems like thin ice to make that argument. All right, so China, a couple of things with the Soviet Union. Who remembers the second phase of the Cold War? Détente. It was Nixon that comes up with this, and it was his negotiations with the Soviet Union really where we get that idea out of it. This détente, it was us and the Soviets supposedly lowering tensions. If you want a particular name, the one ambassador who's most responsible for this is a man named Henry Kissinger. You might have heard that name before. He was the principal force behind this idea of détente. And before we started, it was basically us pretending like they're not at war with us. It was more us. They would say, "Oh yeah, I want to be nice to you," and smack us in the head when we turn around. It was more us who wanted to do that. So anyway, we get that détente with the Soviet Union. Out of that, we get to things you mentioned before, a wave of talks about limiting armaments, us selling them grain, all kinds of things that they were desperate for because they couldn't feed themselves. All right, and then the last thing here with foreign affairs is Vietnam. He focuses on getting us out of Vietnam. We saw under Johnson the Vietnam being ramped up to 500,000 troops, and he begins to pull us out. It takes a little bit of time, but eventually pulls us out. The Vietnamization of the war is part of this détente. It looked bad to claim that we were trying to overthrow communism. We had troops in the field attempting to do that. So, trying to pull these troops out. He was the principal one behind that. There were some very ugly leaks that came out while he was president that made previous presidents look very bad. One principal thing I mentioned before, the Tonkin resolution, that was the resolution that Johnson had to justify full involvement. Right? It came out that document was written prior to the Tonkin incident. And it was like one of those bad gap things you have to fill in and the dates. It's not quite fill in the blank with that idea. They had the language, everything already. You just needed the event. And it came out that Johnson had this document ready, just needed the event to put the right title on it, and then send it to Congress to be approved. So there's some things like that came out that really just kind of added some fuel to this anti-Vietnam War sentiment in the country. Made it very, very ugly. One other thing here with Vietnam is he did eventually send troops into Cambodia and some of the surrounding areas as the communists began to expand their actions. Okay, first term. Second term, a little bit. He runs for office, wins. And the event that dominates his second term and eventually culminates with him being forced to resign in '74 is the Watergate incident. Right, this Watergate incident took place during the election, and what happened was a group of people who worked for the Democratic National Committee, the Republican Party, break into the Democratic Party headquarters and bug it. And then leave. That the place where the Democratic headquarters was at the Watergate Hotel. Right, so a group of people break in, plant these bugging devices, and leave. Eventually, it comes out that it was bugged. There's investigations, and slowly it starts with these low-level guys, and it works its way up. Eventually, the vice president resigns, and then eventually the president himself resigns. There's at the very least, Nixon was involved in trying to cover this thing up, right? If not personally involved with the decision for this break-in. So, all right. So the Watergate incident dominated here. Eventually, he wins the election. That was an issue, but afterwards, this incident begins to take legs. And if you want to, it was August the 9th of '74 that he resigns. Prior to that, he had to say, "I'm not a crook." Which again, that's one of those, if you have to say it, then you've lost the argument. Anybody know any names that are involved with Watergate, other than Nixon? And he was the vice president that resigned. Anybody know any names? What's the talk show host today? I think he's still talking.
Are you referring to like the journalist too, or just like Bob Woodward and?
I wasn't thinking of that.
Oh.
Deep Throat.
Yeah.
That was his source. It was referred to as Deep Throat. So.
I'm thinking of that movie that was based on the two journalists. All the President's Men or something like that.
I don't know about that.
Bob Woodward and another journalist with the Wall Street Journal or something like that.
There were some that were fanatically trying to get you. But anyway, that's not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about somebody involved in an actual break-in. That's a name you might recognize. It wasn't Donald Trump. Nobody? Oh, man. G. Gordon Liddy? You heard that name before? One? I don't know. He organized a break-in. Photos were G. Gordon Liddy. He was working for the Republican National Committee trying to get Nixon elected. Nobody knows that name at all? Yes.
He's all that.
That's a sad day. Gordon, Gordon, and then Liddy, Liddy. I'm not going to argue that this was all completely justified, but at least let me mention to you Liddy's thinking in this. He wrote a book and he goes through this in great detail, but he saw this as war. That was, he actually made an illustration of, I think it was in the National Guard or something, there was a switch in the tank that he worked in called battle override, and it shut down all the safety mechanisms, so you could shoot the gun until the barrel melted down, shut down all those. If you're in the heat of a battle, it's better to have a melted gun than dead. So he described this as throwing the battle override switch. We're at war. The Democrats are wanting to destroy America. Remember the 60s were coming out, the 60s here, and all the protests and riots. So he saw this as a war. If we lost this election, he thought, so we're not out. I don't think it was completely justified, but that was his thinking. And there were some extremely ugly things going on both sides. So, but anyway, he was involved in it. Somebody wrote the name. All right, next president, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford is an interesting man. All right, the first point I have here are some problems that he faced. He stepped into a very big mess. Anybody think of a big mess that he stepped into? Just two. He takes over for Nixon and resigns. The outcome of all of that, he is the next Republican president. The last one just cheated in the election, has to resign. He inherits all that mess.
I would think,
Not that so much. It was more just the whole mess of that. So, anyway, problems he faced. One of them is he comes in after Nixon. That's he has to do that. The second thing is he was never elected. He was elected as a member of Congress, but never elected to any national office. This is really an odd circumstance. Nixon and Agnew win. Agnew's the vice president. Agnew resigns. So the president gets to pick somebody else. So he picks Ford, brings him from the House up to the vice presidency. And then Nixon resigns. So Ford goes from being a member of the House to the president, and never once facing national election. This is his statement. I am acutely aware that I have received the vote of none of you. He never won anything. All right, so he steps into this very awkward position, having to deal with all the mess from the Nixon resignation and all the aftermath of that, and then not actually have been elected to that position. All right, the third problem he faces is a very hostile Congress. There's a video of sharks in a feeding frenzy or something like that. That's the picture here of Congress. They just managed to get, and the Democrats, they managed to get the president to resign, and they're out for blood. It's a very hostile Congress. He only finishes out the term. He does not win re-election. But he vetoes 61 different bills. I would love to have a Republican president revive that. And it gets overridden 12 times. So a very, very hostile relationship with Congress. He actually vetoes the appropriate bills for the most part. They wanted to expand more social support, and starts vetoing this stuff. But a very, very hostile relationship with Congress. All right, a third or fourth, I forget the number on here, is he would have this reputation for being clumsy. And just reputation, really was not. He was actually a very good athlete. Played football for the University of Michigan. But anyway, he, a couple times at the wrong moment, he tripped and stumbled. I don't know the details. He was playing golf and whacked golf balls into the crowd. So just a couple of times he tripped and fell to a wrong point. So he gets a clumsy man. but really is extremely athletic, very, very, very good. Reagan challenges him in 76 for the Republican presidential nomination, just like today, we have the nomination process. And Reagan held up a football helmet and said, when I played football, I wore one of these, making fun of his reputation of him being clumsy and maybe he didn't wear his helmet, but it has this reputation of just this clumsy, bumbling idiot. So, it didn't win. It didn't work. Reagan didn't win the nomination. But anyway, it has that reputation. So, and the last thing, here were some problems, is that he had a very good reputation, but he pardons Nixon, and that kind of butters the waters. He really, beforehand, was looked at as a very honest, decent man. He calls him honest and decent. But he pardons Nixon, so that kind of ruined his reputation. I really don't necessarily disagree with that. So it sets into a very bad spot. If you ever get a chance to go back and fill in for some president, don't do that. Think of these fun finals essays. Which president would you least like to be? All right, he would be at least in the discussion. All right, problems he faced. We don't see him pushing a whole lot of things. Really, just kind of rides out this Bronco to the end, and then we go from him to Carter, even better. So, all right, there's some other things we need to talk about with him. I have the first point here, problems he faced. The second point is rights movement. So this is a wave of different groups demanding their rights. We looked at the Civil Rights Movement already. By this point, we're in the mid-70s. We've had the Civil Rights Act and the riots and protests that settled down. So the Black community got all kinds of these rights. We begin to see others pushing for that. Let me just mention two here. We'll take one and look at it in a little bit of detail. Indians began to push for special rights. It's not worked out so good for them. They do have special rights, but it's destroyed their communities. And even way back at this point, queers and gay rights. At that point, it was people like after they're smoking a lot on the breaks that had these dreams of two guys getting married. And it really was so strange. That never happened. It was discussed and pushed by those groups way back in the 70s. All right, another group that pushed for rights, and we'll talk about a little bit, is women. Women's rights. This is one place where the Miranda rights should be read. You have the right to remain silent. What's that? Every right to be wrong. We should come up for the Miranda women's rights. It's not good. You're outnumbered, so just trying to make something safer. All right, the women's rights movement at this era was the one that gets the most attention and was the most happening. So let me point out to you some of the things that were complained about. We still have some of these complaints today, some of them are kind of funny. Some things they complained about. One was women getting paid less for doing the same job. That one, if you think about it, is laughable on the surface. You don't have to ask for any details. Laughable, but receiving less for the same job. Imagine, Lawrence runs a business, and he can hire one of you girls and pay you 50 cents an hour, or hire one of the guys and pay them $2 an hour, and you're both going to produce the same amount of work. What's Lawrence going to do? Hire the girls for 50 cents an hour, or hire the guys for $2 an hour? If you really are getting the same product. Hire the girl. He's not going to make money as much as he hates girls. He's going to take advantage of you. And really, I mean, people say, oh yeah, we get paid 77 cents on the dollar for what men get paid. If that really were true, no guys would have a job. I mean, these very few guys would have a job. They'd just be the bosses, hire all the women. I don't want to go deep down this road, but I think of any reasons other than prejudice that women tend to get paid less than men.
Maybe we can work the people that think out and work with your like CEOs. That will
Isn't that just part of the system that women are allowed to get those positions?
There's more women who stay at home, take care of the family like that.
Women and men are different. I know it's deep, but they're different. Women, I don't know if you girls are like this, but they tend to be much more concerned about a nice, friendly working environment. The guys just say, well, how much are you getting paid? I don't care if it's screw having just what's the pay. Women have babies. You don't. Women take off work to take care of the children. I mean, they're different. And that's, you know, like saying that apples are cheaper than oranges. See, that's something it looks like there's two different things, right? And really, it was two different things. Right? That still today, women are arguing about this. Listen to Clinton and Sanders, and they bring it up. I think 77 cents is the correct number. 77 cents. Is 79? Oh, better. That's not great. You become more masculine. Not sure that's good. All right. Women receive less. That was complained about. They said that some places women inheriting property, there was hurdles to go through, like if your husband died, you inherited the house. It was it wasn't obvious, like with your son or some things like that. So there's questions about inheritance rights, questions about credit scores. If your husband had a really good credit score, if he dies, then you don't get to inherit it. Things like that. Usually a whole bunch of things that women are different. All right, so women who began to face those things and began to push for these equal rights and there are eventually some extremely radical groups that joined this women's liberation movement, pushing for just really crazy things. They thought that marriage was a form of slavery. As a slave owner, I didn't see that. I'm kidding. But it actually portrayed that as a slave, as like a slave, a wife or a lady that stayed at home, which is a wife with children, that was demeaning. Why would you waste your life washing dishes, making burgers out of little babies' noses? Went away so we could be out in the corporate world and began to teach that idea. And began to really push for women to leave that traditional role. And you could have a career, independent of your husband, send the children off to daycare, and all that things. So we began to really push for that. Began to push for easier divorce laws. It's made it easier for men to walk out with their husband and their wives. It began to be some really radical groups here. Right during this time frame, it's just before his presidency, we have the Roe v. Wade decision in '73. It was a women's rights issue. Still this day, it's women's rights. How dare you men tell us what we can do with our bodies? It's just a sick proposition. Sick proposition. 73 was the decision. By 78, we're having over 1 million abortions a year. Anybody run the big flag about Trump being asked about abortion? If abortion becomes illegal, should we punish the woman? And his answer was yes. And I mean, just people are ballistic. You even backtrack off of it, but imagine if something's illegal and you go and do it. Isn't that much of a stretch to say, maybe we should punish them? Okay. All right, but really, even conservatives or Republicans say, oh, it's crazy. You would punish a woman for doing something illegal. But anyway, so it's still couched to this, it's their right to have an abortion, and it's a constitutional right if you're ever about that. Just read the Constitution. What's that?
It's the right to life.
Yeah. And the whole thing is sick. We like to read the Old Testament stories of people often have babies through gods and things like that. We do it in a little more sterile environment, but we're just as sick, just as us of our society, just as sick. All right, so we get to be some really radical, crazy people involved with that. Let me mention one other thing here with this women's rights movement. And this is something that doesn't actually make it into law, but it was a big flag this time. It was called the Equal Rights Amendment. It was a proposed amendment to the Constitution, supposedly making everything equal. Equality of rights, and this is a quote from the first section, equality of rights under the law shall be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. We couldn't have a guy and a girl and treat them differently or anything like that. You know, supposedly trying to make this a constitutional right. And this thing gets quite a bit of traction. It's proposed by Congress. If you're familiar with the process, it has to then be ratified by the states. So we have this thing getting voted on and decided in legislatures, different entities around the country, state by state, and it never makes it through the ratification process. It doesn't get the required 3/4 of the states to approve. So this thing dies. Finally, at the end of the whole attempt to push it through is in '82, when it doesn't get enough states for it to become an amendment to the Constitution. There is a name that we need to associate with this. She's still around today. I don't think you'll recognize the name. Okay, no, she was fighting against this thing. You recognize that word, but unfortunately. She would have been for this. I don't know what particular role she played here. Have you heard of the Schlafly Report? Have you ever listened to Christian radio someplace? There's a Schlafly Report. Make me feel good. Okay. There was a lady named Phyllis Schlafly. Get her name spelled wrong. Schlafly, I believe is right. Who fought against this thing. She, tooth and nail, fought against this equal rights amendment. She began to go around the country where there, as the vote moved from state to state, much like today we have the conventions and the delegates, the candidates who went around following that. She would go to wherever the next battle was and fight against this thing. Ultimately, she was successful. She began to be criticized by people. It's, oh, you're not a lawyer. How can you really know what's going on with this stuff? So her response was to get her law degree to remove that plank. In the midst of all that, she has 6 children, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, she fights this tooth and nail and is ultimately successful. Feminists used to say things like this: I'd like to burn you at the stake. They spit at her, they hit her, threw pies at her. Tooth and nail. This is a quote by her. The claim that American women are downtrodden and unfairly treated is the fraud of the century. All right, anyway, the equal rights amendment, fought tooth and nail, and she comes up. She's a Christian Muslim striker. The Schlafly Report is still, she's an older lady, to be honest, but she's still around. All right, one more president today. Not going to get any worse. Jimmy Carter. I used to joke about, I'm not sure which president was the most incompetent, Carter or Obama. But unfortunately, Obama's managed to get a whole lot of things done, so I think Carter probably wins. I think Obama's going to do the most damage. Jimmy Carter. All right, let's do this like we've done before. Look at some domestic and it's before issues. All right, domestically, he gave amnesty to draft dodgers from Vietnam. During Vietnam, there were hundreds and thousands of people who were drafted to fight the war, who left the country. They avoided it and refused to serve. They were still out of the country. If they came back, then they faced being prosecuted, thrown in jail, and other things. So obviously this is blanket pardon. If you dodge the draft, you can come home without any consequences. Hopefully that strikes you slightly unfair. There's something wrong with that. Ford had offered an earned amnesty where they could come back, recognize they did something wrong, serve out their term in the military. After that, they would be discharged without any benefits. They couldn't claim insurance. They come back and do some things to kind of earn their right to come back to the country. But it's just a blanket amnesty to all the draft dollars. Okay. Second thing is a few things about the economy. The minimum wage was raised. Should have fixed it all. I still like Walter Williams' solution for the minimum wage. Why stop at 15 or whatever the thing is? He proposed raising it to whatever Congress is getting paid. He came up with an epic article, $200 an hour. Really, if the argument holds to raise it to 15, it also will hold to raise it to 200. I think there it becomes obvious that this idea is stupid. All right, so new minimum wage was set. Also, here's sort of the economy. There begins to be a lot of inflation and unemployment. Inflation gets up to 12, 13% by the end of this term, which means prices are going up 12 and 13% per year. You buy a candy bar that costs $1 one year, the next year it's $1.12, $1.13. That type of increase from year to year. So it's very, very significant. And also unemployment was high. If you studied economics much, according to Keynes and economics, those two things should never happen together. High unemployment and high inflation. High unemployment supposedly means there's not much demand, which means prices should come down. You're starting with some flawed reasoning. For the liberals, they really were at their wits' end about how to address this thing because all of their theory didn't hold. And the answer is their theory was wrong. All right, so the economy is a big, gigantic mess. Right? The third thing to mention here with this domestic affairs is that Congress was controlled by Democrats, but they didn't get along with Carter. So they were at odds with each other. Even though they controlled everything, they didn't get this pushed through, much pushed through as they could. That's kind of a lesson. By the end of his presidency, his approval rating was down to 19%, lower than Nixon when he resigned. Carter, he's still around, telling us how bad Israel is. All right, a couple of foreign affairs things. All right, Carter tried to have a fair and moral foreign policy. You're dealing with people around the world that want to kill you. That's difficult. Fair and moral. The Bob Jones High School textbook summarized it with high ideals, low results. It was just a complete disaster. Rivaling and maybe surpassing Obama's foreign affairs track record. Just disaster after disaster. But he's tried to have this fair and moral foreign policy. He claims, I guess you probably see it, just Southern Baptist, he still teaches the Sunday school class. Very weird. But anyway, suppose this is the Christian way to approach foreign affairs. All right, two particular things to mention with him. The first is the Panama Canal. This is something that dates back to Theodore Roosevelt's time frame when he organizes and has the canal built. Ever since that point, we built the canal, we paid for it to be built. We helped Panama become independent. We paid Panama every year for usage of the canal. Anyway, Panamanians began to strive or not be happy about this and want to get control of the canal. So Carter negotiates with them and arranges for the Panamanians to get control of the canal in 2000. So 2000, we handed that back over to them. Really just a stupid event. To be a little bit fair to Carter here, by this point, the canal was not large enough to handle most of our military ships, so it had lost some of its military significance. But given it to the All right, the last thing to mention is Iran. In Iran, we have a group of crazy extremist Muslims taking over. Not to be shocking. The Ayatollah Khomeini takes over. The Ayatollah was a sort of religious title, pastor of people. The Ayatollah in most of the world, the Shiite Muslims are very high position. But anyway, it had been Muslim before. A guy named his title was the Shah of Iran. He had been there before. He at least was friendly to us. The Ayatollah Khomeini, these more crazy Muslims take over. And they hate America and start chanting death to America and the great state and all this kind of stuff. So this really crazy group taking over. Shortly after that, that would have been 79, January 79. Shortly after that, later that year, in November, these new crazy Muslims, led by the Ayatollah Khomeini, take 53 hostages at the American embassy. The American embassy there, they take over and they capture the people as hostages. Which is a very interesting story of some people at our embassy that escaped out of the embassy before the embassy was taken over, they kept hostage. And them trying to get out of the country. They couldn't just go out to the airport and leave each other. Interesting. But anyway, captures these 53 guys. It was November of 77. And for 444 days, these guys are held hostage. And it becomes a media thing every day. It's the 430th day of these guys. Carter does attempt in the spring of 80 to rescue them with some helicopters, and the helicopters crash in the desert. Complete fiasco there. The hostages are held until Reagan takes office, January 20th, 1981. The day he takes office, they release the hostages. If you're a liberal conspiracy guy, there are people that claim that Reagan had a deal made with the Ayatollah Khomeini to keep these hostages as hostages until he won the election. I think a more sane way to look at it is they knew that Reagan was different than Carter. It's one thing they've got this bumbling idiot that wants to smile and be nice to the world, kind of Mr. Rogers approach to foreign affairs. You guys know Mr. Rogers? I don't want to make myself too away. Mr. Rogers approached to foreign affairs to Reagan, a wild cowboy that always said he's going to start World War III. And they said, it's okay to mess with Mr. Rogers, but Reagan is a different story. And that, I think, was the better way to say it. All right, so the hostages there from our embassy in Iran. All right, questions? We will on Friday look at Reagan's presidency in a little more detail possibly there because of the Cold War. I'd like to finish that on Friday, which I think is very easy.